Why did the most powerful civilizations in the Bronze Age suddenly collapse within 50 years? Egypt, the Hittites, Mycenae, all brought to their knees almost simultaneously. Egyptian texts scream about mysterious invaders arriving from the sea, warriors who destroyed everything in their path. But here's the really strange part. We have zero clue where they came from. Archaeologists have been hunting for their homeland for over a century, and every answer just adds 5 more questions. These invaders were powerful enough to end an entire age of human civilization, yet they left almost no trace of their own culture. No pottery we can definitively identify, no settlements, no written language of their own. It's as if they appeared from nowhere, shattered the ancient world, then vanished like smoke. In the next 10 minutes, you'll understand why the Sea Peoples remain the most frustrating mystery in Mediterranean archaeology. Picture the Eastern Mediterranean around 1300 BC, and you're looking at something surprisingly modern, the first globalized world. Egypt's new kingdom was at the height of its power, with pharaohs ruling from Nubia in the south to Syria in the north. The Hittite Empire controlled Anatolia, what we call Turkey today. Mycenaean Greeks dominated the Aegean Sea with their palace complexes and sophisticated trade networks. These weren't isolated kingdoms shouting at each other across borders. They were interconnected through a web of diplomacy, trade, and cultural exchange that archaeologists call the palace economy system. Egyptian gold flowed north in exchange for Cypriot copper and tin from distant sources. Merchants sailed established routes carrying olive oil, wine, and luxury goods between ports that had been trading partners for generations. We found diplomatic letters written in Akkadian, the international language of the time, showing kings addressing each other as brothers and complaining about late shipments like modern business emails. The Amarna letters reveal pharaohs and foreign rulers negotiating marriages, discussing gold prices, and managing what was essentially an ancient international order. This world had writing systems, professional scribes, specialized craftsmen, and administrative complexity that wouldn't be matched again for centuries. It was stable, prosperous, and sophisticated. Then, in the space of roughly 50 years in the late 13th century BC, almost all of it came crashing down with shocking violence. The collapse itself reads like a nightmare in archaeological layers. City after city across the eastern Mediterranean shows the same pattern. A destruction layer dated to the late 13th or early 12th century BC, followed by either abandonment or a dramatic decline in material culture. Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, the great palace centers of Bronze Age Greece, burned and never recovered their former glory. The Hittite capital Hattusa was destroyed so thoroughly that the empire simply ceased to exist. Major cities in Syria and the Levant like Ugarit were violently destroyed, their inhabitants writing desperate letters begging for help that never came. In one heartbreaking tablet from Ugarit, the last king writes that enemy ships have been sighted and the city is alone. That's where the correspondence ends. The speed is what makes archaeologists uncomfortable. We're not talking about a gradual decline over centuries. This was a systemic collapse that swept through the region in roughly 2 generations. The sharp material decline is visible in every site. Suddenly, there's no more imported pottery, no more luxury goods, no more monumental building. Writing systems disappeared in Greece entirely, creating a dark age that lasted 3 centuries. The Mycenaean Linear B script was forgotten so completely that when archaeologists found tablets, it took decades to decipher them because no continuous tradition survived. This wasn't just political change or a new dynasty taking over. This was cultural disruption on a scale that erased knowledge and broke trade networks that had functioned for hundreds of years. But here's where it gets truly strange. The only major power that survived kept records of the destroyers, and those records raise more questions than they answer. Egypt was the only major Bronze Age power to survive the collapse, and thank goodness they were obsessive record keepers. Ramesses III had inscriptions carved at his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, describing the invasions in detail that's both revealing and maddeningly vague. The texts describe a confederation of foreign countries coming from their islands and coastal regions, attacking by sea and by land. The reliefs show naval battles with impressive detail of ships and weapons. There are images of warriors with distinctive feathered headdresses and round shields, fighting styles that look different from traditional Egyptian enemies. The Egyptian scribes clearly put enormous effort into documenting these attacks because they represented an existential threat. Multiple waves hit Egypt during Ramesses III's reign, and the inscriptions make it clear that these weren't ordinary raids. The invaders had destroyed the Hittite Empire, Arzawa, Cyprus, and various coastal settlements before reaching Egypt's borders. The texts describe how no land could stand before them, which frankly sounds like propaganda, but appears to match the archaeological record of destruction across the region. Here's the problem. Despite all this detailed documentation, the Egyptians never tell us where these people actually came from. They're identified by tribal or ethnic names, Peleset, Tjeker, Shikalesh, Dinyan, Weshish, but these names don't clearly correspond to any known homeland. The Egyptians describe them by what they did and what they looked like, but not where they sailed from or what they called their own country. It's like describing an invading army entirely by their uniforms and battle tactics without mentioning whether they're French or German or Martian. Even the mightiest remaining power, with all its scribes and military intelligence, apparently had no clear idea who was destroying their world. Let's look at what little information we actually have, because it's a masterclass in historical frustration. The Egyptian texts list those names: Peleset, Tjeker, Shikalesh, Dinyan, Weshish, and scholars have spent careers trying to connect them to known peoples or places. Some correspondences seem tantalizing. Peleset might be Philistines, who appear in the biblical record in roughly the right place at roughly the right time. Shikalesh could be Sicilians. Dinyan might be Greeks from Danaan traditions. But these are educated guesses, not certainties, and other identifications have even less evidence. The Egyptian reliefs show this wasn't just a naval raid by pirates looking for quick plunder. They came by sea and by land, with families and ox carts, bringing women and children. This detail has shifted scholarly thinking dramatically because it suggests migration or displacement, not just military conquest. These were peoples on the move, possibly fleeing something in their homelands, possibly looking for new territories to settle. The confederation aspect is equally puzzling. This wasn't a unified empire under one king, but apparently multiple groups acting together or at least moving in the same direction around the same time. That could mean they were allied, or it could mean they were all refugees from the same catastrophic events, or it could mean the Egyptians simply lumped together everyone arriving by ship into one category. The text provides zero reliable information about their original homelands. Did they come from the Aegean Islands? From Anatolia? From the Western Mediterranean? From multiple regions simultaneously? Every translation and interpretation has been argued over for decades, and we still don't have consensus. So naturally, historians have come up with about a dozen competing theories, each one perfectly reasonable and maddeningly incomplete. Here's what makes the Sea Peoples unique among ancient destroyers. They left almost no archaeological trace of their own culture. When the Romans conquered Gaul, we can identify Roman material culture spreading north. When the Germanic tribes moved through Europe, we can track their pottery styles and burial customs. But the Sea Peoples? They're archaeological ghosts. There's no distinctive Sea Peoples pottery that scholars agree on. No architectural style we can point to and say, that's definitely theirs. No written language, which might be explained by illiteracy, except some of them conquered literate societies and apparently didn't adopt writing. No clear settlement pattern where we can say, this is where they established their new homeland. Some scholars argue that the Philistines in Canaan represent settled Sea Peoples, and there is Aegean-style pottery in Philistine sites that appears after the Bronze Age collapse. But even that connection is debated, and it doesn't explain the other groups or where they went after the invasions failed or succeeded. This absence is deeply weird because we're talking about forces powerful enough to destroy multiple empires and end an entire age of civilization. These weren't small raiding parties. They were large enough to threaten Egypt repeatedly, coordinated enough to campaign across hundreds of miles, and militarily sophisticated enough to defeat Bronze Age armies. Yet they left less archaeological evidence than a single modest farming village. It's as if they erased themselves from history as thoroughly as they erased others. Every other major migration or invasion in ancient history left material traces we can study. The Sea Peoples are the exception, and no one can adequately explain why. So who were the Sea Peoples? After a century of archaeology and scholarship, the honest answer is, we still don't know for certain. They might have been displaced Mycenaean Greeks fleeing their own collapsing civilization. They could have been Anatolian refugees from the Hittite fall, or Western Mediterranean pirates, or Balkan tribes, or climate refugees from multiple regions moving simultaneously. Each theory has tantalizing clues and fatal gaps in the evidence. What we do know is their impact. They fragmented the interconnected Bronze Age world, ended palace economies, created the Greek Dark Ages, and possibly gave rise to new Iron Age peoples like the Philistines. The Sea Peoples remain crucial to understanding how quickly sophisticated civilizations can unravel when systems fail and how thoroughly history can forget even the most consequential players. Maybe future archaeology will find their homeland or decipher new texts that finally solve the puzzle. Or maybe they'll remain exactly what they've always been, the enemy without a face, the destroyers without a home, history's most successful vanishing act.